Kenya tops our Across Africa report. Kenyan officials said security forces now control nearly all of the upscale malls seized by members of the terrorist group Al-Shabaab, who invaded with guns blazing 3 days ago. The death toll now stands at 62. And judges at the International Criminal Court today adjourned the trial of Kenyan Vice President William Ruto for a week so he could return home to deal with the ongoing terrorist crisis in Nairobi. Ruto and Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta are charged with crimes against humanity for their involvement in a wave of violence that swept their country after elections in 2007. Now, joining us with a further update on this terrible shooting in Nairobi, Kenya, is our Across Africa correspondent, Frankie Edozien. Hey, Frankie, good to see you.
Good evening, Debbie. How are you?
I'm doing fine. You know what? This massacre at this mall just seems unimaginable.
Awful.
It's just absolutely awful. And a lot of people, for the first time, are hearing about Al-Shabaab. We had Dr. Sanders on earlier in the show, told us a little bit of the history of this organization. But I want to ask you a couple more questions. And first of all, this attack particularly was highly organized, highly coordinated. That means it had to be highly funded. Who backs this organization?
So for many, many years, up until 2011, Al-Shabaab had lived off of taxes paid to the Somali people. So if you flew into the airport, if you had goods in the port, and they also had a jihadist contribution, another tax. The United Nations estimated that in 2011, they earned or they collected between $70 to $100 million in taxes.
Wow.
That's a lot of money for a shadowy group that people don't seem to know about.
Absolutely. That's serious money. And who leads this organization?
That is an issue. They have a push-pull. They have a leader who is Somali himself, but they also have a splinter group within Al-Shabaab, which is the foreign-born fighters, and they both have different goals. The foreign-born fighters, we talked a couple of weeks ago about how an American was killed, foreign-born Al-Shabaab fighter. They want to have a greater regional presence, a greater global presence, more aligned with Al-Qaeda. Meanwhile, the Somali fighters are thinking about a domestic Somali rulership where they can control the country and make it fundamentally Islamist. They were so rigid that if a woman was accused of adultery, she was stoned to death. If somebody was accused of theft, his hands were cut off. So they were very strict in their interpretation of Islam. But they were also responsible for foreign workers leaving Somalia. And remember, 2 years ago, there was a famine in Somalia. And while people were starving, they would not allow food to come in. So they have also lost some ground support as well.
Yeah, I've read that they have lost some influence in Somalia itself, which might explain these foreign attacks for them. And people might also remember the attack during the World Cup.
In Uganda, in Kampala. It was the World Cup final. Lots of people, 70 people died. That was an Al-Shabaab bombing. What really was the crux of the matter was that Uganda and Kenya were part of the African Union forces that have driven them back. And not only driven them out of Mogadishu and Kismayo, really cut off a lot of their revenue stream from those taxes they were collecting. So this is all part of a way to sort of not only make themselves relevant, but to punish the people who have cut off their funding stream for the most part.
Yeah, part of their goal was to get recognition. They certainly didn't.
They've certainly done that today. And one of the interesting things that has come out of this is that people are saying foreign-grown fighters from Al-Shabaab, people are now looking to the Twin Cities area where a lot of people were recruited from. They have this not wonderful, but very interesting videos on YouTube, these Al-Shabaab fighters recruiting people, speaking perfect English, looking like they're in a tropical paradise. Really, Somalia is not a tropical paradise, but somehow they're able to get some people from Western countries to come and fight with them. And then in February this year, they pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda, cementing their role in the global terror network.
Well, they've gotten attention now of the international scene, that's for sure. Let's move on and talk about a couple other things. There's a lot happening across the continent. Tell us about the oil being stolen in Nigeria.
Yes, this is a really awful situation. You know, President Goodluck Jonathan is in New York, and just about an hour and a half ago, he was at the New York Stock Exchange ringing the bell, trying to get investors to come into Nigeria. But Chatham House, which is a British research organization, released this report that said Nigerian security officials and the Nigerian government is party to the theft of 100,000 gallons of oil barrels of oil produced daily, which if you sort of do the numbers, they estimate $3.6 billion lost. And the Nigerian security operators, as well as government officials, are party to this theft. Bunkering, as is referred to in local parlance, is basically when you go and you steal oil and you move it to the Gulf of Guinea and put it on barges, and the government has no way of knowing where this is going on. The report was also damning because it said that government officials participated actively in doctoring documents and doctoring meters so that some of this oil could go away. You know, Nigeria has a large economy, lots of people, but it has not yet lived up to its economic potential for basic infrastructure for the people of the country. So this report is really, really a blow to Nigeria, but
Absolutely.
also to its president, who's here saying, come do business with us, ringing the stock exchange bell. And yet, this report comes out just days before his visit to New York. So
yeah,
it's really awful.
That's really unfortunate. And probably his reaction to this information will be a test of his mettle.
Yes, would like to see what he says. He has not addressed this directly, but his own government just a few months ago put out a similar report, not as damning as this, but basically called the situation an emergency. That oil theft by government officials is something that needed to be addressed, just as all the other threats to the Nigerian economy are. That needed to be addressed. And it's very difficult when the people who are alleged doing the thievery are the people governing you.
Absolutely.
So, who is watching the hen house?
Yeah, well, yeah, the fox is watching the hen house. And I would think it would do great damage to the economy as well.
It's awful because Nigeria is really, I think, in most people's minds, still the giant of Africa, but it has not lived up to its potential for its people. There are a lot more people who are struggling for basic necessities than they should. It's one thing to have poor people in your society. It's another to be a terribly wealthy nation in terms of revenues coming in, and to have a lot of that siphoned and stolen by the people who are supposed to be taking care of you.
Okay, and then finally, you're going to tell us a little about the former First Lady of the Ivory Coast being brought up on crimes against humanity?
Yes, but this time she's not being sent to the International Criminal Court like her husband Lawrence Gbagbo is. Simone Gbagbo is going to be tried in Abidjan. This is really, really interesting because we've seen in the last couple of weeks the kind of pushback some African nations have had with the ICC, but Cote d'Ivoire or the Ivory Coast has been a big supporter of the ICC, and now they're saying, well, we've reformed our judiciary and we're going to try her here and see what happens. She has been under house arrest since that bloody uprising when her husband refused to concede the elections and thousands of people were killed. And the ICC's indictment says that she was a really big part of it.
Well, I know that you will monitor that. Keep
Yes.
us updated on that.
We'll see if they're able to convict her or if she gets let go. One of the things that ICC has been working with has been, and they have really put this to African countries, that you guys have not done anything, which is why we have to step in. You may say we're targeting Africans, but in your homelands, you haven't done anything. Ivory Coast may be able to do something, so we'll have to see.
All right, Frankie Edozien, always great information. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next week.
Alrighty.
And you are watching Arise America.